Thank you. So maybe as I'm beginning here, a little intro on what CartoVista is all about. So I'm a physical geographer. Obviously, with my accent, you guess I'm from Canada. Can't hide that. So I started this dream about building a company that, really focuses on data visualization and GIS. And I've actually had the pleasure of meeting quite a few software engineers and hired software engineers, but I tried to teach them how to deal with projection. That was a big no-no and a big problem. So finally, after all those years, they finally got it, and we were able to actually put together an interesting solution to visualize data in HTML5. We've been working on this for at least 10 years. So I'm very excited to have a chance to share with you what we've been doing, especially when it comes to flow maps. So let's move on here. This is the canvas of my presentation, essentially. Quick introduction. I'm just going to cover the basics of why we're doing this and why do we care. And I'm going to go through 4 use cases of using flow maps with our software and a real example of how we've used it. So flow maps, where is this coming from, really? It's all about the movement of almost anything. I thought we start with a very important movement of wine. So this is a good example of product export. France obviously exporting, in this case, its wine. This is going back 1845, so quite a long time ago. You could see the export from France. So flow maps, they've been there for a long time. They've been around. So there's 3 things, really, is what flows. So what's going out of where, and the direction of the flow is the key thing. So there's an origin and there's a destination, and more importantly, how much is flowing, or the quantity or the volume is flowing. It's a key piece. So really, that jives extremely well with thematic mapping capabilities, being able to work with colors, being able to work with style and stroke width, graduated size, all those options are really perfect when it comes to display this kind of data. Now, how does the data look? Most of the origin destination data is essentially a matrix. So this is a pretty good example right now that you see. We have 16 regions on this table. You can see that the X and Y axis is the same, so it's a number that represents the region. We have the region in the middle, which is Montreal. As you can see, as I'm highlighting that cell, has the corresponding region and the number of people that are actually migrating in this example from that region. So very simple matrix. And the thing is, with that matrix is obviously as the more items you have on your map, the more complex it gets. And you really end up having a representational challenge, because essentially it's a matrix and you could have hundreds of links between all those items. So too much data to represent. So you need really a way to represent and define your origin or destination. So there has to be some user interaction in here. There's also the challenge of legibility. This can be very hard for you to read and understand and figure out. So what's a potential solution to deal with that problem? One way is to use Bezier Curves. HTML5 provides us with the ability to look at flows from an origin to a destination, use Bezier Curves. Obviously, there's several ways you can do this, but one way you can design it in such a way that you try to avoid all the overlap between all those areas. So now, talking about HTML5, obviously using the techniques that we have with HTML5, using the canvas, it's really an opportunity to do that client-side in the browser. There are options in HTML5 that really give you a lot of power, a lot of capability to do amazing rendering, do things that we do in Photoshop, like drop shadows, outer glow effects that otherwise wouldn't be possible or now possible using a canvas. And you can really deliver a nice user experience in the browser directly, and it's also responsive. So let's take an example, a deeper look at how we can actually integrate that. So in this slide, I'm explaining a little bit some of the lessons learned of how we structured essentially our web maps. So we're looking at the flow data. The flow data in this case is in vector format. So we have JSON feed. The origin destination data is as well in JSON. That separation of the map feature from the data gives us the capability to bind information on the client and do the rendering. Now, we also have the base map in this case, which are expressed in raster or could be vector. In this case, I'm just going to show raster. All right, so flow data, very simple flow data. It's just origin, destination, and values. So it's a JSON feed that has pretty much all the data, and you can just integrate that quite easily. So let's take a look at what we can do with vector in HTML5. And I thought I'd illustrate this with a call to a service. It's actually here maps, so let's take a look at what's possible. All right, I'm just going to make this full screen. Alrighty. So this is a typical example of a CartoVista project where we have a series of maps. I can click on a specific map. I can load a session. In this case, it's drive time analysis that we've created for Vancouver. So the first thing you'll notice as I'm mousing over some of those areas, you can see we have a rollover effect on those polygons. So we actually highlight the feature with a nice drop shadow. HTML5 gives us those capabilities. As I'm mousing over, we can have a data tip show, and it's clear which polygon it is. Now, we can also click on the map and ask to generate additional isochrones. You can specify timelines, and again, as I mentioned, this is using the Here API, which, by the way, is very fast and really intriguing. So you can pick your departure time, you can pick the color scheme that you want, and the features will be added on the fly. They're going to be added to the web map. And then again, the rendering for those polygons using the canvas is very nice. Because again, a lot of those polygons happen to be overlapping because they keep going, obviously, in time, and they're going to end up overlapping with the existing content. And having the rollover effect really gives you the capability to understand those complex geographies. Now, let's take a look at flows in more details. So the first example I've chosen is essentially a map about trading. It's classic trading, actually it's Europe information, trading from one port to another. And in this case, what we've done is we've created some static flows. So let's start investigating this map. So this is a map of Europe. As you can see, we have some tiles in the background. The flows are represented as line. We have the dashboard with the bottom showing all the table. And obviously on the right-hand side, we have different charts and the legend. So the first thing you'll notice as I'm navigating in this map, mousing over the items, is we highlight all the features, and actually we highlight the items in the legend that are corresponding. So you see the corresponding color in the legend. Everything is highlighted in the data table at the same time. HTML5 gives us that capability. Now with, in this case, it's also bidirectional. Whenever I mouse over the legend, we highlight the features on the map. So by having events, you could select features, like right now I'm selecting in the data table directly, and we could see the selected feature on the map. This is a very interesting way to navigate. Now, something else that is important is with CartoVista, we can actually deploy multiple theme of interest. Right now we're looking at the volume of departure. You can pick a different theme. That theme will be displayed right there very easily. And you could see that we can also filter the data. For instance, I can filter only on the flows that are coming or originating from Spain. So having the ability to filter the data like you would do in Excel is extremely useful. You can also go in, change the colors that are used to represent the flows very easily right there in the browser. And the beauty is when you change it, you see it right away. You don't have to go back to the server. Everything happens right away. You can also change the representation. Right now I'm changing the calculation. You can change the value and the size of the stroke width right there, and you can see the change right away in the web browser. Having the capability to do that is extremely useful for some of our users and really appreciated. If you have data that classifies the actual flows, in this case, who was the ultimate importer, you could show that by color and look at the changes over time. You notice that the flows are changing. As we're changing with the date, there's more, and the ultimate importer is not necessarily the same company. As we're doing that, we're actually filtering the table as well, as you can see. And we can further filter as much as we want, really. Something else you notice that we have with the product is the charts. The charts on the right-hand side give you the capability to view the current theme, which is right now the ultimate importers. But you can also add additional chart on the fly and create the charts that you want. In this case, let's say we want to compare 2 different years. We want to compare the imports for 2016 and 2014. I can add those. I can specify how I want to see it. as aggregated symbols, for instance. So in this case, it's going to take all the data and will aggregate it for me on the fly. Again, another very simple way. So as you can see, as I'm selecting on the map, the chart are being updated to show you the data. Something else that we've done, we really wanted to enable the user to create or change the theme that they want to build. So you can remove the current representations that you see right now on those flows, and you can create your own. So I can use what we have at the top of the map, the plus menu, to create my own thematic analysis. So I can pick what I want to see, the measure that I want, let's say the trade product. I can choose how I want this to be represented, let's say by color. And then the theme is displayed right there in the client. And I can still filter the data if I want to, very simply using the filter effects. We can also play with the stroke width and add an additional thematic option on top of this. So I can go with a measure, in this case the volume, and I can choose how I want to see this. In addition to graduated size, we can also do scale ranges, which may be more appropriate depending on your data. And again, you can go in and change how the calculations are done, whether you're using Jenks or another method. And you can change the individual ranges. Let's say in this case, the higher range, I want to make the stroke width a little larger just to make it more predominant. Something else that we've worked on is the ability for you to actually print the map. And that's something that I'm going to show in a minute. There's also flows, internal flows that you can have. In this example, we show some pie charts. It is possible to add a symbol overlay or pie charts on top of this, obviously. And this data changes with time as well, which is convenient for the user to look at the business changes and the data. Printing was also something that many of our users requested. They all wanted to have the ability to print. It's sometimes challenging to print on the web, so we spend quite a bit of time developing it. We have an option to navigate inside your print window, so once you're in print mode, you can really adjust the map how you want it, and as you can see, the legend and each of the components can be customized quite easily. So at the end of the day, you can just export your PDF and you're pretty much good to go. All right. Just going to go quickly to use case number 2. As you've guessed, I'm from Quebec, so I have to have Quebec maps. So this is a good example of migration data. So let's take a look at migration. But before looking at Quebec, I just thought we get the ball rolling by showing some of the base maps that we've built. So this is an example of the maps that we've designed. I had the pleasure of working with Dany right here in this room, which helped us design those great base maps. They're all done with our tools. This is a map of, as you can see, Norfolk. We're going to migrate north a little bit. This is DC, going up north. You can see some of the things we've done here in terms of design. The whole focus of the base map is to focus on the thematic mapping and really design it so with pale colors so that they don't really interfere with the thematic data we're trying to show. So right now I'm showing all the different regions. You notice little things. We have a drop shadow effect on that layer. We can play with the opacity of each of the layer. Obviously, HTML5s give us that option. And you could really have rich interaction. So now let's see what we can do in terms of representing the flows on the fly. So we have what we call the inbound flow tool. You can click anywhere on the map to define an origin or a destination, and it actually draws the flows for you based on the data. So right now, I've just clicked on that region. It actually created a thematic analysis in the background and also represents the flow as an overlay. So as I'm changing from one region to another, it's actually going to display the most important flows originating from that region. Having the capacity to do that is interesting, and also the ability that each of those flows are actually represented as vectors. As you can see when I'm mousing over, they're real features on the map. They are Bezier curves. They respond to events, and you can have them as fully interactive components. Now in this case, I just clicked on the region of where I'm from, which is Lac-Saint-Jean, way up in the north. As you can see, most of the people from Lac-Saint-Jean, they just happen to move to Quebec City. They don't have much of a choice because the only road that goes there is that one. So you have to go there. You have no choice. And actually, if you look pretty carefully, there's a pattern going on here. You know, most of the people actually are heading south. Maybe there's a reason, or maybe it's weather related. I have to say I sure enjoy the weather here. It's much better than what we have in Canada right now, so kind of really like that. So something else that we wanted to enable is give the power to the user to change the representation. As I was doing before with the static flows, you can go in and change how the calculations are done. You could use logarithmic scale or square root if you'd like on those ranges, and change the minimum and maximum, and it changes the flows on the map. Something else, you notice that we are creating random colors. Maybe the color that is there is not good. You can change it, make it more appropriate so that it really stands out. Something else that we wanted to build is giving you the ability to not only look at one flow, but look at more flow. So you can use the Shift key to have more than one origin or destination on the same map. As you can see, it starts to become pretty complicated. And this is where you can start to decide how many flow you want to draw on the map. You have the flow count option in there to control how many flows are being displayed. And after a while, it becomes crazy and it looks like a circus map. You can't really figure out what's going on. Anyhow, the ability to control that has been very useful, and our users really appreciate the flexibility they have in representing the data that way. All right, moving on to a little bit more details. I mentioned Quebec City. If you have a chance to go, beautiful, beautiful city. It's an amazing place to visit. So let me show you a little bit what we did for Quebec City. We actually did a pretty intensive survey of the population. So I'm just going to go very quickly in that one. There's over 800,000 people in the city. So first of all, when you click on the flows, you notice that we have a nice inset to show that people that are moving outside of the city, we can show that with the map. It's a very similar interface as the previous demo. We just go into a little bit more details in this case. I can still click on origin, destination, show the data. But more importantly, I can pick the mode. So the number of people that are doing self-driving or potentially are using public transit, I can make a comparison just by selecting in the drop-down list. It's really good to explore data, and that's the reason why we wanted to develop that interface, is we wanted people to start exploring the different flows, and having the capacity to do that was what we wanted when we built this prototype. Again, because there's so much data, so much migration information, it was really hard to see otherwise. You could see I just clicked on somewhere in the north. You could see most of the people that are taking public transit end up on the north side of the city, really, at the end of the day. The other thing that we wanted to build was to give the ability for the end user to also look at the table. So every time we generate flows, we have the table below the map. It gives me the flow, the origin, destination, the number of commuters, and also the percentage. So all of those features are created on the fly as I'm clicking on a specific origin. And I can, of course, click on those lines to see them or navigate to the corresponding item on the map. That's what you would expect in a system like this. So the other option that's interesting is also the ability to control the flows. Right now I'm showing 10 flows. It may make sense for you to adjust if you don't have too many flows. Obviously, up to a certain point, it becomes completely not legible. So you really want to work it out. The other thing is to consider internal flow. So there are people that are working or are migrating in the same object, in this case, in the same city or the same sector. So we show internal flow with sort of like a specific arrow that I'm showing now, which shows the inbound flows. So having the ability to turn that on or off is an option, and obviously it changes your ranges and your calculations. All right, I'm gonna go very quickly here. There's other options, obviously. The other option is to show from one origin to a destination. So a very, very interesting way. So instead of looking at outbound, you can look at inbound flows. All right, something else that I found as I was navigating in this is look at the motive. Why are people moving or going from one place to another? So you can go and see the one that are doing shopping. And I can actually validate that this map, you can see the dark green area. It is true because there's 5 shopping centers right there in that city in Quebec. And I've been there many times, so it's a great place to shop. But then if you go and look at in the morning, nobody goes there in the morning, obviously. Nobody goes there in the rush hour. So, you know, when I looked at this, it makes sense. So at least the customer data seems right, which is a good thing. All right, I'm gonna keep going here. I have one more quick demo I wanna show. I'm running out of time, obviously, as I was expecting. So this is something else we did, US related, so the last is going to be the best, so US demo with a lot of data. I'm just going to show that one really quickly. This is the American survey. So we were dealing with, you know, a lot of information using the American Community Survey. So this is using data cubes and data tables that you can look at origin destination data. What we've done is connected with a cube in the back end and the ability to take that data and represent it. So you can define your origin destination by clicking on the map and having it directly available in the browser. And there's a lot of flexibility in this. You can even do this down to the census tract level. So a lot of flexibility, and you were really pleased about how this integrated with the existing solution. All right. So, final conclusion. So HTML flows in HTML5 maps. Why is this interesting? I think it can really help visualize origin destination data. It can be quite high quality. It can display very well in your browser without having to worry about the performance. Performance is there. It's going to be well supported on mobile devices too. And obviously you can have interaction with charts, legend, and other components. And to me, more importantly, the most important thing is you can enable the user to play with the data, change the data, and customize the data. And to me, that's really empowering the end user to do more with the data and understand potentially patterns and things that matter. That being said, that presentation is available online. So if I can just hit the next slide. So that presentation is available online at cartovista.com, presentations NACIS 2018. So I've been using a web-based software to present. And my email is there. If you have questions, it'll be my pleasure. So thank you so much. Yeah, what we did essentially is we set up some different print size, so 8.5 by 11, the standard letter and all those print size essentially, and you need to pick the right size when you go into your print session. Yeah, that's how we've designed it. Yeah. The here map sample I showed originally, there was a call to the here maps API, but the flows, everything is happening client side. There's no. Essentially, we download all the vector. Everything is created on the client using JavaScript. And by the way, we have a software development kit that enables to create those applications. So it's right there. So if you are a JavaScript developer, you can go crazy and build those things if you want.